Okay, folks, so I'm sorry I couldn't be here today. My son is sick. Anyways, this is the next best thing I could come up with. So I'm going to go ahead and work every single problem on this worksheet, showing all of my work. Please feel free to fast forward to only the problems that you have questions on. I will do my best to make sure I zoom in close to the problem so that you can see what problem I'm working on as you're trying to fast forward. So here we go. Number one, this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. And so since the short leg is a whole number, I can go ahead and use the shortcut. Now, I'm not going to use show this shortcut every single time. I'm going to show it this one time, and then I'm going to work the problem the full way, just because I don't want to confuse people. I'll show it once for the people who use the shortcut. Other than that, I'm going to be done. So if the leg is 6, then the hypotenuse is 6 squared of 2. That's all there is to it. 6, 6, 6 squared of 2. Why? Because this is a 45, 45, 90, which has a value of 1, 1 squared of 2. All right, so that's the shortcut. Here's what I would do. 1, 1 square root of 2. So this is going to be 6, 6, and then x. Grab this proportion and cross multiply. X equals 6 times the square root of 2. There we go. Let's go to the next one. Number 2. So for number 2, again, it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle, so I'm setting up my proportion. This time I have 9 square root of 2, 9 square root of 2, and x is my hypotenuse. Again, remember, the right angle points to the hypotenuse, and the legs of an isosceles triangle are always congruent. That's why I have two 9 square root of 2s. I'm going to grab a proportion and cross multiply. 1 times x equals 9 square root of 2 times the square root of 2. In this case, I want to take the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, which gives me, I'll write it like this, the square root of 4. And so x equals 9 times 2, which is the square root of 4. And so then x equals 18. Number 3. For number 3, again, these are the legs. Those are congruent. So the hypotenuse is 9 square root of 2. 1, 1, square root of 2. So I have x, x, and then 9 square root of 2. Always, always, always reduce down your fractions. And so I get 1/9. And so now, when I grab that proportion and cross multiply, I have x equals 1 times 9. All right, number 4. For number 4, again, these are the legs, and the right angle points to the hypotenuse. And so I have 1, 1, square root of 2, and this is going to be 12, 12, and x. Grab my proportion, cross multiply. 1 times x equals 12 times the square root of 2. Number 5. 1, 1, square root of 2. And again, in this one, I know that it's a 45, 45, 90 because I know that these two sides are congruent. That means these two angles are congruent. And since we have a 90-degree angle down here, then these must be 45s. Okay, that's how I know. Setting up my proportion, grab that proportion and cross multiply. So I have x times the square root of 2, and that's going to equal 1 times 8. And so I divide by the square root of 2 on both sides. X equals, all right, well, this is the situation where I have to rationalize. So I multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2, which is going to give me 8 square root of 2 over the square root of 4. Well, what is that really? That's 8 square root of 2 over 2. And 2 goes into 8 4 times. And so my final answer here is 4 square root of 2. All right, number 6. Number 6. Again, I know that this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle because these angles are congruent. If I could write 45, that'd be great. There we go. So this 45, 45, 90, remember the three angles of a triangle always have to add up to 180 degrees. So I have 1 square root of 2, and this is going to be x, and then 5 square root of 2. Always, always, always reduce your fractions. And so I now have 1 over x equals 1 over 5, and I cross multiply. So x equals 1 times 5 is 5. All right, so moving on to number 7. For number 7, we now switch to 30, 60, 90 triangles. So 30, 60, 90 triangles have the different shortcut. It's 1 square root of 3, 2. 1 square root of 3, 2. 1 is always the shortest leg, and the shortest leg is always opposite the 30-degree angle. And so this is going to be 5 square root of 3. The hypotenuse is always being pointed to by that 90-degree angle. It's always the longest leg, so x goes there. That means y must go here in the middle. Please, please, please pay close attention to that. The 30-degree angle is opposite the shortest side, which then goes below the 1. Don't worry about where the square root of 3 is, or if there's a square root of 2 in it, or if there's some other funky number in it. Just pay attention to what the hypotenuse is and what the shortest side is. Don't worry about the numbers. Don't match up numbers. All right. So solving this, I'm going to go ahead and solve for y first. Right there, I'm going to cross multiply. So I have 1 times y equals 5 square root of 3 times the square root of 3. And just like previously, I want to multiply those together first. And that is going to give me the square root of 9. And so I really have y equals 5 times 3. Therefore, y must equal 15. Okay, now I want to solve for x. And so to solve for x, I'm going to take that first fraction and that last fraction. I'm going to take those two together. I'm going to rewrite it so it's not so sloppy. So I have 1 over 5 square root of 3 equals 2 over x. And I, again, need to cross multiply. So I have x equals, now I get 5 square root of 3 times 2. I'm going to go ahead and write that out. 5 square root of 3 times 2. Again, remember, this is 5 times the square root of 3. And so what I want to do is I want to take 5 times 2. I don't want to multiply by square root of 3 yet because that gives me a decimal. So I'm just going to leave it as is. So I get x equals 10 square root of 3. Let's take a look at number 8. For number 8, again, I'm going to set up my proportion. And so the shortest side is always opposite the 30-degree angle. The hypotenuse is always being pointed to by the right angle. And so then y goes in the middle. Always, always, always reduce your fractions. And so now, if I solve for y, I get y times 1. And that's going to equal 4 times square root of 3. Nothing more I can do there, so that's my answer. And now I want to take the outside fractions here, which gives me 1 over x equals 1 over 4. You can probably guess what the answer is going to be, but let's go ahead and cross multiply anyways. So I get x equals 1 times 4 is 4. Let's take a look at number 9. For number 9, Again, setting up my proportion. 1 square root of 3, 2. Opposite the 30-degree angle is my short leg, x. The right angle points to the hypotenuse, which is y. And 18 is then the long leg. Okay, there's my proportion. Cross multiply. X times the square root of 3 equals 1 times 18. Divide by the square root of 3 on both sides. And again, this is a situation where I need to rationalize. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of 3. And what I end up getting here is 18 square root of 3 over the square root of 9. So that means x equals 18 square root of 3 over 3. But I'm not done there, because I can actually simplify that down. 3 goes into 18 6 times. So x equals 6 square root of 3. Okay, I need to solve for y still, so I'm going to go ahead and grab these two fractions. And I'm going to go ahead and rewrite those just to make sure it's not so sloppy. Okay, and so cross multiplying, I can take y times the square root of 3. And that's going to equal, and now I want to take 18 times 2, which is 36. So we divide by the square root of 3 on both sides. Y equals, hey, I got to rationalize. Square root of 3 over the square root of 3 gives me 36 square root of 3 over the square root of 9. So 36 square root of 3 over 3. 3 goes into 36 12 times, and so y equals 12 square root of 3. All right, let's take a look at our next one, number 10. So for number 10, again, setting up our proportion, 1 square root of 3, 2. Opposite the 30-degree angle is my short side, which is y. The right angle points to my hypotenuse, which is 16, and so x goes in the middle. Always reduce down your fractions when you can. And so now I'm going to go ahead and solve for x first, cross multiplying. X times 1 equals 8 times the square root of 3. Okay, and now I want to solve for y. So I'm going to take the outside fractions, since those are the ones I know. I'm going to rewrite that just to make it clear. Remember, I reduced that fraction. That's where I got the 1/8 from. And I can cross multiply. So y times 1 equals 1 times 8. Let's look at number 11. For number 11, now again, I haven't done the shortcut on 30, 60, 90s yet, because we hadn't had one that was set up perfectly for it. Well, this one is set up perfectly for it, so I will go through this quick on the shortcut. So number 11, we have 11 as my short leg. It's opposite this 30-degree angle. And so remember that the numbers we need to remember for 30, 60, 90s are 1, square root of 3, and 2. So that means this is 1 times 11 to give me 11. That means y must equal the square root of 3 times 11 to give me 11 square root of 3. And x must equal 2 times 11 to give me 22. And so y equals 11 square root of 3, x equals 22. And we're done. That's the shortcut. But again, if you're not comfortable with that, or you just want to stick to a good thing, which is this proportion, just set it up. Opposite the 30-degree angle is 11. The hypotenuse is being pointed to by the right angle, so that's x. And then y is the long leg. So we grab our proportion and we cross multiply. 1 times y equals, and we're going to take 11 times the square root of 3. And there we go, just like we said. Now we need to solve for x. So I'm going to take the outside fractions, and I'm going to rewrite for clarity. Okay, so we cross multiply. 1 times x equals 11 times 2. And there we go. Let's take a look at number 12. For number 12, set up our proportions. 1, square root of 3, 2. Opposite the 30-degree angle is our short leg. The right angle always points to the hypotenuse, so that's y. And we have 13 square root of 3 then goes in the middle. Always, always, always reduce your fractions. And so I get 1/13. And so now when I solve for x and cross multiply, I'm taking x times 1, and that equals 1 times 13. And when I solve for y, using those two fractions, I cross multiply, take y times 1, it's going to equal 13 times 2, which is 26. All right, we're now on to the back side. Let's take a look at number 13. As I said in class on Friday, number 13 and 14, those are essentially 5 problems each. So what I'm going to do is off to the side here, I'm going to go ahead and draw my 5 problems. And again, these are all 45, 45, 90s. And so I have one where this is 5. So this is 5, and I'm solving for y. I have another, well, you don't need to watch me do this. Give me a second. All right, so I've now drawn the 5 situations talked about here in number 13. And let's go ahead and solve. So looking at our first one, set up my proportion. 1, 1, square root of 2. Remember, we're dealing with a 45, 45, 90 triangle now, so I got to go back to 1, 1, square root of 2. So I've got 5, 5, and y. Cross multiply. 1 times y equals 5 times the square root of 2. Let's look at the next one. 1, 1, square root of 2. So this is x, x, 4 square root of 2. Always, always, always reduce down your fractions first. And so now if I solve that proportion, cross multiply, x times 1 equals 1 times 4, and so x equals 4. Next one, 1, 1, square root of 2. And so I've got square root of 2, square root of 2, and y. Again, follow where the numbers go, not what the numbers are. The 2 legs are congruent, so those go below the 1s. Okay, so solving this proportion, 1 times y equals the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. Well, the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4. And the square root of 4 equals 2. Next one, 1, 1, square root of 2. So 9, 9, and y. Solve that proportion. 1 times y equals 9 times square root of 2. And there we go. Last one. 1, 1, square root of 2. So x, x, 24. Solve this proportion, cross multiplying. I get x square root of 2 equals 1 times 24. So I've got to divide by the square root of 2 on both sides. This goes away, but hey, I've got to rationalize here. Multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2, which gives me 24 square root of 2 over the square root of 4. And so x equals 24 square root of 2 over 2, 2 goes into 24 12 times. So x equals 12 square root of 2. Okay, so there's the answers to number 13. Let's take a look at number 14. Number 14 is going to be the exact same situation, and I'm just going to set up the first problem here. Go off camera for a moment to draw the rest. Alright, so I've got my 90-degree angle here, this is 60, this is 30, and they tell me that A equals 9, so that's this side right there. This is B, this is C. Okay, so I'm going to take a moment then to draw the rest of these triangles. Alright, so again I've got these triangles all laid out for us, so now we need to go through and solve. So looking at the first one, 1 square root of 3, 2. 9 is opposite the 30-degree angle, so that's the short side. And let's see, the right angle points to the hypotenuse, which must be C, and so B goes in the middle. We need to cross multiply, so I'll take 1/9 and the square root of 3 over B. Cross multiplying gives me 1 times B, and 9 times the square root of 3. So B equals 9 square root of 3. C is going to be from the 1/9 and the 2 over C. I should have used a different color there. That's okay. I'll just rewrite it. So cross multiplying. 1 times C equals 9 times 2. Let's look at the next one. 1 square root of 3, 2. Opposite the 30-degree angle is our short leg. The right angle points to the hypotenuse. 9 must go in the middle. Taking my first proportion, I get 1/9. Oops, excuse me, I misspoke. I get A square root of 3 equals 1 times 9 is 9. And so now I need to divide by the square root of 3 on both sides. And I need to rationalize. So square root of 3 over square root of 3. And I end up getting, I'll rewrite it down here so I save room. A equals 9 square root of 3 over the square root of 3 times square root of 3 is the square root of 9, which is 3. And so 3 goes into 9 3 times. A equals 3 square root 3. All right, we need to find C. So to do that, I'm going to use these two fractions. Cross multiplying, I get C times the square root of 3. And that's going to equal 9 times 2. And so I've got to divide by the square root of 3 on both sides. And I need to rationalize. Square root of 3 over the square root of 3. Excuse my sloppy handwriting. I now have 18 square root of 3 over the square root of 9, showing that step this time. So C equals 18 square root of 3 over 3, and the 3 cancels with the 18 6 times. So C equals 6 square root of 3. Next one. Okay, 1 square root of 3, 2. And opposite the 30-degree angle is our short leg. The right angle always points to the hypotenuse, and so A goes there. Grabbing my first two fractions here, cross multiplying, 1 times A, 5 square root of 3 times square root of 3 gives me A equals 5 square root of 3 times the square root of 3. If I multiply square root of 3 times square root of 3, I get the square root of 9, which is 3. So A equals 5 times 3. A must equal 15. And now solving for C, I need to grab the first fraction and that last fraction. So I'm solving, wrong color. 1 over 5 square root of 3 equals 2 over C. And I'm cross multiplying. So I get C equals 5 square root of 3 times 2. And here I want to multiply 5 times 2. So C equals 10 square root of 3. All right, 2 left. We have 1 square root of 3 and 2. Opposite the 30-degree angle is our short leg. Let's speed things up here a little bit. This one actually works well for the shortcut. And so we have 11 times 1. This must be 11 times the square root of 3, and this must be 11 times 2. 1 square root of 3, 2. And so B equals 11 square root of 3, and C equals 22. It's actually the same problem from the front side. All right, let's do this one. 1 square root of 3 and 2. So, again, opposite the 30-degree angle is the short leg. The right angle points to the hypotenuse. And so then B goes in the middle. I'm going to grab the first fraction and the last fraction. And hey, before I do that, always reduce your fractions. So, I have 1 over A equals 1 over 8, and if I cross multiply, I get A equals 8. And now I want to take my last 2 fractions. So cross multiplying here gives me B times 1, and that's going to equal the square root of 3 times 8, which is 8 square root of 3. All right, so there's the answers for number 14. Now, in writing down these answers, I noticed that I made a mistake. Maybe you caught that before, maybe you didn't. But right here, this middle problem, I made a mistake. And the mistake I made, it's right over here. When I drew this picture, I put my 30-degree angle in the wrong spot. I did it right here, did it right there, did it right there, did it right everything else except for on this one. I swapped those angles. And so that does change the whole problem. Just really quick, trying to correct that mistake here. If I draw this triangle, it's supposed to be 90. This was the, almost did it again. This is the 60-degree angle. This is the 30-degree angle. And so this is 5 square root of 3. We're solving for A and C. And so when I did my proportion, what I should have done was put A as my smallest side. And then again, C is my hypotenuse. And so 5 square root of 3 goes in the middle. And we would be able to cancel in that case, giving us 1/5. And so solving that proportion, A equals 5, and then solving this proportion, C equals 10. So my work here is correct for the picture that I drew, but actually my picture is wrong. Okay, so the correct answers there should be like that. All right, let's move on to number 15. Here we go. So for number 15, we have a 45, 45, 90. I know because it's a right isosceles triangle. And so that means these sides are congruent. And so S equals 10. Done with that part. And I got to find R. So 1, 1, square root of 2. I got 10, 10, and R. Cross multiplying here, I get 1 times R equals 10 times the square root of 2. And so there's my other answer. Let's move on to number 16. So for number 16, I'm solving for P, Q, and N. So looking here, one thing is, I can probably guess what N's going to be. It's going to be 30, but let's find out how would we actually solve that. Well, I would solve that because I know that 2n plus n plus 90 has to equal 180 degrees. 2n plus n is 3n. Subtract 90. So then 3n equals 90, and I divide by 3. And so that's supposed to be canceling, and n equals then 30. So n definitely equals 30, which means that P is the small side. And 30 is my hypotenuse there. So I've got 1 square root of 3, 2. We said 30 was the hypotenuse, P was the short leg, Q is then the long leg. That is a Q. There we go. Always, always, always reduce your fractions. That's 1/15. And now we can solve for Q. Cross multiplying, I get Q equals square root of 3 times 15. And solving for P, I need the first fraction and my last fraction. And so cross multiplying that, I'm taking P times 1, 1 times 15. So P equals 15. Number 17. Number 17, again, we've seen this type of setup before. These have to be 45 degrees because they're congruent. And we have a 90-degree angle down here, making them have to be 45 degrees each. Okay, so 1, 1, square root of 2, we have 12, 12, and y. Cross multiplying, 1 times y is going to equal 12 times the square root of 2. And there we go. Let's take a look at number 18. For number 18, just like the problems we had in our homework, except this time they already have that segment drawn in for us. So that's convenient. So this must be 6. This must be 6. We really don't need this side at all. But looking at this triangle now, I see it's a 30, 60, 90. So I'm going to use 1 square root of 3, 2. And I know that this is a 90-degree angle, making this a 30-degree angle. So this side, B, is my short side. Opposite the 90-degree angle, the 90-degree angle points to the hypotenuse, which is A. And so 6 must go in the middle. Solving this proportion, I'm taking B times the square root of 3. It's going to equal 1 times 6. Divide both sides by the square root of 3, and hey, look, I've got to rationalize. So the square root of 3 over the square root of 3 gives me 6 square root of 3 over the square root of 9. So B equals 6 square root of 3 over 3, which I can then reduce. 3 goes into 6 twice. And so B equals 2 square root of 3. Okay, and we're not done. We've got to solve for A as well. So coming back up to our proportion up here, I want to solve this proportion. And so again, I want to cross multiply. I'm going to take A times the square root of 3, and then I'm going to take 6 times 2. So A times the square root of 3 equals 6 times 2 is 12. Divide by the square root of 3. That means I need to rationalize, which gives me 12 square root of 3 over the square root of 9. This gives me the square root of 9, which is 3. And 3 goes into 12 4 times. So A equals 4 square root of 3. Number 19. For number 19, lots of different ways you could go about this problem. Probably the easiest way is just to go ahead and transfer some of the data. Looking at this, I know that this is C, this is C, this is C. From the setup here, I actually know that this is going to be a square, and so I know that D is going to equal, not 12, it's going to equal 24. Okay, you might think, well, how did I know that? Well, one way I can know that is I know that this triangle is congruent to this triangle by side angle side. And so it has to be 12. It has to be congruent. Now finding C, well, again, if this is a 90-degree angle and this is an isosceles triangle, these are 45-degree angles. And so I'm using 1, 1, square root of 2. And so I've got C, C, and 12. Cross multiply. So c squared of 2 equals 12. You need to divide by the square root of 2. This cancels away. Over here I've got to rationalize, which gives me 12 squared of 2 over the square root of 4. And so c equals 12 squared of 2, that's a 2, over 2. And 2 goes into 12 6 times. So c equals 6 square root 2. All right, there's our answers for 19. And we are finally down to the last problem. One trick in this one. Right here, they are giving us that entire angle is 105 degrees. How do I know? Well, because if this is 90 degrees and this is 30, then in this triangle, this has to be 60 degrees because it has to add up to 180. Well, what is 105 minus 60? Well, that tells me this is 45 degrees. And so then I have a right angle here, and that means this must be 45 as well. All right, so now that we've got the angles all figured out, let's go ahead and solve for H, G, and F. So we've got to start over on the blue triangle, the 30, 60, 90. So I'm going to have 1 square root of 3, 2. Opposite my 30-degree angle is the short leg, which, by the way, if I look at the 45, 45, 90, which is isosceles, those two sides are congruent. So that short leg has got to be G. And then the hypotenuse is always opposite the 90-degree angle. It points to the hypotenuse. So there's 16, and so F goes here. Always reduce your fractions if you are able to. And so now I can cross multiply. F times 1 equals 8 times the square root of 3. There's our answer for F. And I can take the first fraction and that last fraction. 1 over G equals 1 over 8. And again, cross multiplying, or it's pretty easy to see that G must equal 8. And now we need to find H. Well, looking at H, that's going to be part of this triangle, which is a 45, 45, 90. So I use 1, 1, square root of 2. So I get, I could say G and G, but really I already know what G is. It's 8. And then H goes below the square root of 2. So solving my proportion, 1 times H equals 8 times the square root of 2. There we go, folks. If you have any questions, please go back through the video and look for your answers. And I'm sorry, again, this is the best I could do. My son is sick. You should be taking your quiz next, and then make sure to pick up a review. That is your homework. It will be due on Wednesday when we take our test. Good luck.